After 8.5 months of war in Gaza, the Israeli government still says it plans to destroy Hamas. But there was a remarkable quote from the spokesperson of the Israeli army in an interview. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari called into question the Israeli government's goal of eliminating Hamas.
Hamas is an idea. Whoever thinks we can eliminate Hamas is wrong. I am not referring to the alternatives. The political echelon has to decide on that, and the Israel Defense Forces will implement it. But this business of destroying Hamas is simply throwing sand in the eyes of the public. If we don't bring something else to Gaza, then at the end of the day, we will get Hamas.
I'm joined now from Washington by Aaron David Miller, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and a former U.S. government advisor for Arab-Israeli negotiations. A very warm welcome. How do you interpret those comments from the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, that Israel saying it will make Hamas disappear is throwing sand in people's eyes?
I mean, on the analytical level, I think it reflects what the Israeli intelligence community and senior IDF officials have believed for quite some time. And it brings to mind Kissinger's quip in 1969 at the height of the Vietnam War. The guerrilla wins if it does not lose. The conventional army, conventional military loses if it does not win. And the reality is, yes, the Israelis have done grievous damage to Hamas's organized military structure, its command and control, its rocket launch facilities, its laboratories. But the reality is Hamas will maintain a military capacity, maybe 10 to 15,000 fighters, and it will endure either as an insurgency or alternatively, given the weakness of the Palestinian national movement, specifically the Palestinian Authority, it will remain a potent force able to influence politics in Gaza either through intimidation, co-optation, or both.
Do you think that is just becoming clear to the IDF at this stage? At the start of Israel's invasion of Gaza after the October 7th terror attacks, experts did warn of essentially Hagari's point that Hamas is an idea that can't just be stamped out by killing its supporters. So why do you think we are hearing this from him now?
Well, because I think after almost 9 months, and it's hard to believe next month will be the 9th month of this war, the IDF, not the political establishment, Mr. Netanyahu and his right-wing government are doing most of the fighting. They understand how difficult it is for the IDF to operate. They understand that every time there's a strike which kills Palestinians or worse, a mass casualty event, that the war loses legitimacy. Particularly in the United States, but in Europe and other places as well. And they understand that the only way to, if in fact it's even possible to defeat Hamas, is to create an alternative structure, an alternative set of governing principles to facilitate security and prosperity, which Gaza has lacked under Hamas's rule since 2007. And the current government of Israel simply has no intention of engaging either the Palestinian Authority or creating any sort of hope in the form of a political horizon to establishment of two states, for example. So I think by and large, the IDF is not breaking so much with the government, but making it quite clear. And I think it will become an effective pressure point, I suspect, in the days and months ahead on the Netanyahu government.
Do you think there is a part of Prime Minister Netanyahu that also understands this and understands what the IDF spokesperson is saying here?
No, there's absolutely no doubt, except the prime minister, now the longest governing prime minister in the history of the state of Israel, his key domestic constituency isn't the Israeli Defense Forces. It's, number one, his right-wing coalition and the maintenance of his prime minister. Because if he no longer is prime minister, we should have elections. If elections were held in Israel today, most probably Mr. Netanyahu would not be able to form a government. And on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in Jerusalem District Court, he faces the prospects of a conviction or alternatively a plea bargain to avoid jail time, which would mean the end of his political career. So no, staying afloat, catering to the right wing, seems to be his MO. And the Knesset adjourns on July 25th. If he makes it to that date, Knesset doesn't resume again until 2 weeks before the American elections. And he'd be in a position then, as prime minister, to make a judgment on who the next president of the United States is going to be and adjust his tactics accordingly. I suspect, barring some event that we can't divine or foresee, with respect to his political future, we're probably talking sometime next year.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. That is Aaron David Miller with the Carnegie Endowment. We very much appreciate your time. Let's follow up on that and get across to Israel and journalist Balig Sladeen joining me from Tel Aviv. So more than 8 months into this war, we've heard Israel has not achieved its goal of eliminating Hamas. At this point, do most Israelis believe Israel can, in fact, destroy Hamas?
Well, it depends who you ask, after all. Today, a poll showed that only 36% of all Israelis believe in that absolute victory that Benjamin Netanyahu is talking about. But it depends, how do you define victory over Hamas? Because after all, you can destroy Hamas's military wing. You can also find an alternative for Hamas to govern Gaza or other places. But the ideology, just like Daniel Hagari has said, is something that you cannot defeat. So if the absolute victory is defeating the ideology, then I don't think this is something that is possible. It hasn't been possible with ISIS. It hasn't been possible with other armed groups or terrorist groups in the past. So this is something that will keep in being present in some way or another. But it's absolutely possible to defeat the military wing at some point. And that's something that most Israelis do believe that is possible. And if you frame the question as whether the military should continue the operation until reaching victory or defeating Hamas, then I think that most Israelis will agree. Polls show that as well. They even don't agree that we should go for ceasefire in order to free the hostages. This is something that is debated in Israel. I think the numbers are shrinking, but there is still a majority that believe that defeating Hamas as a military wing is possible.
Let's talk a little bit more about that and the hostages. Israel recently freed 4 hostages in a big military operation, but has cautioned that it won't be possible to free many other hostages in this way. After statements like this from Hagari, do you think pressure has been growing among a certain sector to reach a ceasefire and get hostages home that way through negotiation?
Well, definitely yes, but I don't think that Hagari gave anything new, because everyone knew that it's not possible to actually free 120 hostages just this way, especially if we're talking about 40 or 50 of them are still alive. Hamas is absolutely putting guards beside them, and whether the military getting closer to them, they will shoot them or disappear in some way or another in the tunnels. So this is not a new statement, this is not a new idea. And the pressure is coming from the families of the hostages that are saying that the only way to see the hostages back is a deal that has been proven to be the safest way to bring the hostages back. And I think that many Israelis, I wouldn't say a majority, believe that it's a price that we can pay, a ceasefire, in order to reach a point where the hostages will be free. This is a huge issue, of course, for the Israelis.
We've also seen lots of big anti-government protesters demanding a change of government. How effective do you think those have been in exerting pressure on the current government to hold new elections?
Well, a poll just a couple of hours ago from a leading Israeli media said that 54% of Israelis do support these protests, do support investigating what happened on October 7th, something that, of course, many Israelis do support. But when it comes to the question of effectiveness, this is another issue, because after all, Netanyahu has 64 members in his coalition, and I don't think that any of the parties there is willing to sacrifice themselves in order to go for a new cycle of election that they will absolutely lose it. Even if it's not losing it as a government, maybe the government will continue, because I don't see the opposition forming any other government. But there will not be, Itamar Ben-Gvir will not be a minister in any other government than Netanyahu's government. And also, Haredis, for example, would get what they are getting from Netanyahu from anyone else.
Thank you so much for joining us. That is journalist Balig Sladeen in Tel Aviv.